An unexpected discovery. The UES Magellan cruised through the inky void of unexplored space, its sensor arrays constantly probing the darkness for any sign of resources, habitable worlds, or intelligent life. Captain Nadia Ivanova sat in her command chair, eyes flicking over the data feeds streaming across the main view screen. It had been 3 long years since the exploration fleet set out from Earth on this mission of discovery, and so far the most exciting thing they'd found was an asteroid field with traces of uranium. As Nadia was about to retire to her quarters, the sensor officer called out in alarm. "Captain, I'm picking up a massive energy signature on long-range scanners, bearing 227 Mark 15. It looks like ships, dozens of them. But the readings are unlike anything I've ever seen." Nadia felt a thrill of excitement and trepidation. After so long, could this finally be first contact? She ordered the Magellan to alter course and increase to maximum sublight velocity. As they drew closer over the next few hours, the strange readings solidified into ghostly silhouettes on the view screen, an entire fleet of colossal alien vessels hanging dead in space. The ships were behemoths, dwarfing anything humanity had ever constructed, geometric and coldly utilitarian in design. Their dark hulls were pitted and scarred, with no running lights or signs of active power. Nadia ordered the fleet to hold position and hailed the ships on all frequencies, but there was no response, only a deep, unsettling silence. That was when they picked up the distress beacon, a tightly focused transmission on repeat, coming from the largest of the alien ships. When decoded, the looping message was simple: critical malfunction. Crew dead. We failed. May the Eternal Empress forgive us. Nadia drummed her fingers on the armrest of her chair, mind racing. The implications of what they'd discovered were staggering. Not only was humanity not alone in the universe, but they'd stumbled upon the remains of a spacefaring civilization far more advanced than their own. The ships alone represented a quantum leap in technology, even in their current wrecked state. If they could be studied, reverse engineered. "Captain, your orders." Commander Demir Osman, her first officer, looked at her expectantly. Nadia took a breath, knowing her next words would be for the history books. She thought of the famous line uttered by Armstrong all those centuries ago. "We're going in. I want a full Marine detachment suited up for Zerog radiation. We're boarding that ship." As the Marines cycled through the airlocks, weapons at the ready, Nadia watched the alien derelict loom larger in the view screen. An involuntary shudder ran through her. After all this time searching, they'd finally made contact with another spacefaring race. But the circumstances couldn't be worse. Still, this was an opportunity humanity couldn't pass up. The secrets locked within that ship could propel them centuries ahead. And yet, some primordial part of her whispered that there were things in this universe that should remain undiscovered. The Galactic Empire arrives. 3 hours later, after a painstaking sweep and clearing of the alien vessel, the Marines had established a safe perimeter, and the science teams were starting their analysis. Nadia watched the video feeds from the safety of the Magellan's bridge, awed by the cavernous, maze-like interior of the ship. The architecture was strange and unsettling, all harsh angles, disorienting curves, and pulsing conduits of an unidentifiable material. Dr. Elena Sartori, the fleet's xenorchaeologist, was in her element, excitedly babbling about the implications of the ship's design and the bizarre, unreadable glyphs covering every surface. "Judging by the carbon scoring and the damage, I'd say this ship has been here for centuries, maybe even millennia," she said over comms. "But the technology, it's like nothing I've ever seen. The power systems alone air." A klaxon blared through the bridge, making Nadia jump in her seat. "New contact." Ensign Park called out, his voice tight with tension. It just appeared out of nowhere, 50,000 kilometers off the starboard bow. The view screen shifted, and Nadia felt her blood run cold. A ship had materialized as if from nothingness, a gigantic arrowhead of gleaming black metal, its lines jagged and cruel. Azure lightning crackled along its hull, and swarms of smaller craft buzzed around it like angry wasps. It was pristine and thrumming with power, easily dwarfing the Magellan and her escorts. "We're being hailed," the comms officer reported, her voice shaking. Nadia straightened her uniform, trying to project a calm she didn't feel. On screen, the image that appeared was simultaneously beautiful and terrifying. A statuesque humanoid female clad in form-fitting armor, the color of a dying star, her skin a rich shade of indigo, her eyes molten silver. A circlet of pulsing crystals adorned her brow, and when she spoke, her voice was like silk sliding over a blade. "You have trespassed in the sovereign territory of the Thantrian Imperium," the alien woman declared. "Your primitive ships are forfeit, and your crews are now slaves of the Eternal Empress. Surrender immediately or be destroyed." Nadia's mind raced as she processed the Vine's words. Thantrian Imperium. Eternal Empress. This was far beyond a simple first contact scenario, but she couldn't show weakness, not now. She rose from her chair, meeting the alien's imperious gaze. "I am Captain Nadia Ivanova of the United Earth Ship Magellan. We are on a mission of peaceful exploration, and mean no disrespect. If we have violated your territory, we apologize, but we do not recognize your claim to this area of space, nor your authority over us. We are representatives of a sovereign power, Earth, and we do not bow to threats or intimidation." The alien's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, Nadia thought she saw a flicker of surprise on that arrogant face. "You dare defy the Imperium? You ignorant savages have no conception of the power you face. We are the masters of 1,000 suns, the inheritors of the celestial mandate. A backwater species like yours should be honored to even gaze upon us." Nadia bristled at the naked contempt in the alien's voice. "We may be ignorant savages to you, but we have faced down would-be conquerors before, and we do not surrender our freedom to anyone, no matter how powerful they claim to be. I suggest you rethink your approach if you wish to establish peaceful relations with Earth." "Peaceful relations?" the alien scoffed. "The Imperium does not treat with lessers. You will submit or perish." Her eyes flashed with zealous fervor. "The Empress wills it, and we are her instrument across the stars. You have 1 hour to lower your shields and prepare to be boarded for processing. Resist, and your ashes will be scattered across the void." The view screen went dark, and for a moment the only sound on the bridge was the hum of the air circulators. Nadia slowly sank back into her chair, her heart pounding, the taste of fear acrid on her tongue. They'd finally made contact, and it was with a fanatical, galaxy-spanning empire that saw them as chattel to be ground beneath their heel. The Magellan and her small fleet stood no chance against the firepower that ship had casually displayed. But she knew in her bones that they would not submit. Even if it meant their destruction, humanity would face this trial as they always had, united, defiant, and unbroken. She keyed the ship-wide comm, swallowing hard before she spoke. "All hands, this is the captain. We have encountered a hostile alien force that calls itself the Thantrian Imperium. They have demanded our immediate surrender under threat of annihilation." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "I know you're frightened. I am too. But I also know that each and every one of you swore an oath to the Alliance, to humanity itself. We will not bow to tyranny, no matter what form it takes. What we choose to do here, in this moment, will echo through history. So ready yourselves and stand firm. For Earth, for freedom, for the future." As her crew scrambled to battle stations, readying their weapons and steeling their hearts, Nadia turned to face the view screen once more. The alien dreadnought loomed before her, terrible and vast, an obsidian sword poised to strike humanity down. She straightened her shoulders, her eyes cold and sharp as scalpels. "So," she murmured, "this is how they wish to do things. Well, these Thantrians are about to learn the hard way what it means to poke a human backed into a corner. Let's show them what we're made of." And with a final, resolute nod, Captain Nadia Ivanova, daughter of Earth, gave the order that would ignite the First Galactic War. Fire. Exploiting the Empire's weakness, the void of space rippled and burned as the Magellan's weapons impacted against the Thantrian ship's shields in actinic bursts. But it was like throwing stones at a fortress wall. For all their efforts, the alien vessel remained pristine and untroubled, its own weapons charging with an ominous hum. Damage report. Nadia barked, gripping the arms of her chair. No effect on the target. Ensign Park replied, despair creeping into his voice. Our railguns and missiles can't pierce their shields, and they're powering up some kind of energy lance. It's like nothing I've ever seen. Nadia's mind raced, desperately trying to formulate a strategy. Earth had encountered hostile species before, but never one so utterly beyond their weight class. The technological disparity was staggering. It would be like a caveman trying to fight an attack helicopter. But as she watched the Thantrian ship on the view screen, she noticed something odd. The lightning dancing along its hull seemed to flicker and wane, and the menacing hum of its weapons took on a sputtering, uneven quality. It was subtle, but unmistakable. There, she said, pointing at the screen. Do you see that? Their power output is fluctuating. Commander Osman leaned forward, eyes narrowed. You're right. It's like their systems are glitching. Maybe a result of whatever happened to that derelict fleet we found. A spark of hope kindled in Nadia's chest. If the Thantrians' tech was malfunctioning, even slightly, it could give them an opening. A chance to strike back, or at least buy time to transmit a warning to Earth. She opened a comm channel to the Magellan's chief engineer. Imani, I need you to analyze the Thantrian ship's energy signature. Look for any irregularities, any weaknesses we can exploit. On it, Captain, Imani replied, her fingers already flying over her console. Minutes ticked by with agonizing slowness as the Thantrian ship continued to charge its weapon, the Magellan's hull groaning under the stress of its own evasive maneuvers. Nadia's heart pounded in her ears, her knuckles white on the armrests. And then, a miracle. Captain, I've got something. Imani's voice crackled with excitement. There's a pattern to the fluctuations. Every 37 seconds, their shield matrix experiences a 0.6 nanosecond dip in power. It's not much, but if we time it right. Nadia grinned fiercely, the thrill of impending battle singing in her veins. A 0.6 nanosecond window to get a shot through. That's more than enough. She turned to her weapons officer. Lieutenant Commander Nakamura, prep a full spread of torpedoes and a concentrated railgun salvo. Sync the firing pattern to that shield fluctuation. Aye, Captain, Nakamura replied, his hands already dancing over the controls. Weapons sensed and ready. Nadia took a deep breath, centering herself. This was it, their one shot. The Magellan was a science vessel, not a warship, but she had teeth. It was time to use them. Fire on my mark, she said, eyes locked on the view screen. The Thantrian ship loomed before her, its energy lance pulsing with murderous intent. She watched the seconds tick down, the fluctuations in its shield like a stuttering heartbeat. 3, 2, 1, mark. The Magellan shuddered as it unleashed its fury, torpedoes and railgun rounds leaping from its launch tubes in a brilliant staccato. For a breathless instant, Nadia thought they'd mistimed it. But then the projectiles slipped through the Thantrian shields like needles through silk, slamming into the obsidian hull with devastating force. The alien ship reeled, explosions blossoming along its flank, its energy lance sputtering and dying. A ragged cheer went up from the Magellan's crew as they watched their tormentor falter. But their elation was short-lived. Even wounded, the Thantrian vessel was a behemoth, its armor shrugging off the worst of the damage. It turned ponderously to face them, its eyes glowing with baleful light. Insolent primitives, the alien commander hissed over the comm, her voice dripping with fury. You dare strike the Imperium. You will suffer for this affront. Nadia stood tall, unflinching in the face of the alien's wrath. We dare, she said coldly. We may be primitives to you, but we're primitives who just put a dent in your invincible ship. What does that say about the vaunted might of your Imperium?" The alien's face contorted with rage, but there was something else there too. A flicker of uncertainty, of fear. In that moment, Nadia knew they had struck a blow not just against the Thantrian ship, but against the very foundation of their arrogance. "This is not over," the alien snarled. "The Imperium will not forget this insult. You have made an enemy today, humans. An enemy that will not rest until your worlds are ashes and your people are broken." With a final, hateful glare, the Thantrian cut the communication. On the view screen, the wounded dreadnought began to turn away, its engines flaring with the blue-white of a ship preparing for hyperspace. "They're running," Commander Osmond said, disbelief coloring his voice. "We actually hurt them enough to make them turn tail." Nadia nodded, a grim smile tugging at her lips. "We did, but this is just the beginning. We've got their attention now. And something tells me they're not used to having to work for their conquests." She turned to her crew, pride and determination shining in her eyes. "We may have won this battle, but the war is just starting. Get me Terran command on the Ansible. They need to know what we found out here. And have the science teams keep working on that derelict fleet. If the Thantrians' tech has weaknesses, we need to find and exploit every last one of them." As the crew leaped to carry out her orders, Nadia settled back into her chair, her gaze fixed on the stars. The galaxy had just become a much more dangerous place, but also one ripe with opportunity. The Thantrian Imperium thought itself the apex predator of the cosmos, but they were about to learn what humanity was capable of when pushed to the brink. For the first time in their long, bloody history, the Imperium had reason to fear the consequences of their own arrogance. And in the heart of a humble science vessel, a new legend was born. The legend of Captain Nadia Ivanova, the woman who stared down an empire and refused to blink. The war for the stars had begun, and humanity would not go gently into the night. They would rage, they would fight, and they would win. For Earth, for freedom, for the future. A daring plan. In the days following the skirmish with the Thantrian dreadnought, the Magellan was a hive of activity. Engineers worked around the clock to repair the damage sustained, while the science teams pored over every scrap of data they'd gathered from the derelict alien fleet. Captain Ivanova was a constant presence, moving from one crisis to the next with tireless determination. She knew that their victory, such as it was, had bought them precious time. But it was a reprieve, not a pardon. The Thantrians would be back, and in force. They needed a plan, and fast. The key, she believed, lay in the treasure trove of alien technology that had fallen into their laps. The derelict ships were a glimpse into the Imperium's capabilities, their strengths and vulnerabilities. If they could unravel those secrets, find a way to level the playing field. She called a meeting of her senior staff in the Magellan's war room. They gathered around the holographic display table, faces drawn and eyes shadowed from too many sleepless nights. "All right, people, let's hear it," Nadia said, bracing her hands on the table. "What have we learned from our new friends in the scrapyard?" Dr. Sartori spoke up first, her voice tight with excitement. "Captain, the technology on those ships, it's light years beyond anything we've ever seen. Their power systems, their propulsion, their weapons, all of it is based on principles we barely understand. But there's one thing that stands out." She tapped a command, and the hologram flickered to life, displaying a schematic of one of the alien ships. "Every vessel we've analyzed has a central computer core, a kind of quantum-entangled neural network that seems to control all of the ship's functions. It's like an artificial intelligence, but one that operates on a level we can't even begin to comprehend." Nadia frowned, staring at the slowly rotating image. "An AI that advanced could be a huge problem for us. If the Thantrians have that kind of computational power at their disposal." "That's just it, Captain," Sartori said, a fierce grin spreading across her face. "We don't think they do. Look here." She zoomed in on a section of the schematic, highlighting a dense cluster of circuitry. This is the core's primary processing node, and in every ship we've studied, it shows the same pattern of damage. It's subtle, almost undetectable, but it's there. Nadia leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. Damage? From what? We believe it's a virus, Sartori said, a staggeringly sophisticated one. It seems to be designed to infiltrate the core's neural network and slowly corrupt its higher functions. Over time, it would cause cascading system failures, erratic behavior. Sound familiar? Nadia's mind flashed back to the battle, to the flickering lights and sputtering engines of the Thantrian dreadnought. The malfunction, she breathed. That's what crippled them. Sartori nodded. Exactly. And if this virus is present in every Thantrian ship, it could be the chink in their armor we've been looking for. The room erupted into excited chatter as the implications sank in. A weakness, a flaw in the seemingly invincible Imperium. It was a glimmer of hope in the darkness. But Nadia held up a hand, her expression grave. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Even if this virus is as widespread as we think, we still have to find a way to use it. The Thantrians aren't going to just let us waltz into their ships and start mucking about with their computers. Maybe we don't have to, Commander Osmond said slowly, a thoughtful look on his face. We know the Thantrians are arrogant, that they see us as primitive savages. What if we played into that? Made them think we were offering surrender, only to strike when their guard is down. Nadia's eyebrows shot up. A Trojan horse. Risky, but it could work. If we could get a team onto one of their ships, introduce the virus directly into their system, it would spread like wildfire, Sartori said, her eyes gleaming, crippling their fleet from the inside out. They wouldn't know what hit them until it was too late. A slow smile spread across Nadia's face, a smile that was equal parts anticipation and grim resolve. Then that's our play. We let the Imperium think they've beaten us, that we're ready to submit, and when they come to collect their prize. She slammed her fist into her palm, the crack echoing through the room like a gunshot. We strike. We hit them hard, fast, and where they least expect it. We show them what it means to underestimate humanity. The room fell silent, the weight of the moment settling over them all. They were proposing to take on an empire, to pit their wits and courage against a foe that outclassed them in every measurable way. It was audacity bordering on madness. But as Nadia looked around at her crew, at the steel in their spines and the fire in their eyes, she knew they would not falter. They were human, the sons and daughters of Earth. They would not go quietly into the night. All right then, she said, her voice ringing with challenge and promise. Let's get to work. We have a war to win. And with that, the die was cast. The Magellan and her intrepid crew set about their desperate gambit, a plan as daring as it was dangerous. They would beard the lion in its den, carrying the virus that could bring an empire to its knees. The future hung in the balance, teetering on the edge of a knife. But for now, there was only the mission, the unbreakable bond of comrades in arms, and the indomitable human spirit, burning bright against the dark. The Empire's fury. The Thantrian Imperium was not used to failure. For millennia, they had reigned supreme over the galaxy, their might unquestioned, their rule absolute. Countless civilizations had fallen before them, worlds and peoples crushed beneath the Imperium's inexorable advance. So when word reached the eternal empress of the humiliating defeat at the hands of a primitive upstart race, her rage was terrible to behold. Courtiers and generals alike trembled before her wrath, as she vowed bloody retribution against the humans who had dared to defy her. "Bring me their heads," she snarled, her eyes blazing with murderous fury. "I want their worlds burned, their people enslaved. I want them to suffer for their insolence." Her minions leaped to obey, marshalling the full might of the Imperium for a punitive campaign of unparalleled brutality. War fleets gathered, armies mustered, and the Thantrian war machine rumbled into action, eager to crush the impudent humans and restore the Imperium's battered pride. But even as they prepared for all-out assault, A whisper began to spread through the ranks of the Imperium's forces, a rumor, faint but persistent, that the humans had sent an envoy, bearing an offer of surrender and submission. The Eternal Empress was at first inclined to dismiss such talk as mere wishful thinking. The humans had proven themselves a stubborn and intractable foe. Why would they suddenly capitulate? But as more reports filtered in, all saying the same thing, a cruel smile began to curve her lips. "So," she purred, "the savages have finally learned their place. They beg for mercy, for a chance to prostrate themselves before their betters." She leaned back on her throne, savoring the delicious irony. The mighty humans, laid low by their own arrogance. It was almost too perfect. "Very well," she said, waving a languid hand. "Let us hear their plea. Bring this envoy before me, so that I might look into their eyes as they surrender their freedom and their future." The trap was baited. The Imperium, in their arrogance and their hunger for vengeance, never suspected that they were being played. They saw only what they wanted to see, a beaten foe, ripe for the taking. They could not know of the desperate gambit unfolding in their midst, of the Trojan horse that even now was being led into the heart of their power. They could not guess at the courage and cleverness of those they dismissed as primitive, or the lengths to which they would go to protect their own. And so, with pomp and circumstance, the envoy was brought before the Eternal Empress in her grand audience chamber. A single human, clad in the simple uniform of a low-ranking officer, standing small and insignificant before the assembled might of the Thantrian elite. The Empress regarded the human with a mix of curiosity and contempt, noting the pallor of their skin, the dull, cowed look in their eyes. This was the face of defeat, of a spirit broken on the wheel of Thantrian supremacy. "Speak," she commanded, her voice ringing through the cavernous hall. "Let us hear your surrender and know the depth of your shame." The human raised their head, meeting the Empress's gaze with a strange, haunting intensity. For a moment, the Empress felt an uncharacteristic flicker of unease. There was something in those eyes, something that didn't belong. "I bring a message," the human said, their voice flat and expressionless. "From Captain Nadia Ivanova to the Eternal Empress of the Thantrian Imperium." The Empress leaned forward, a predatory gleam in her eye. "And what says your captain?" What honeyed words of capitulation fall from her lips? The human was silent for a long moment. Then, with a suddenness that shocked all present, they threw back their head and laughed, a wild, ringing laugh that echoed from the vaulted ceilings and marble columns. Capitulation. They gasped, mirth and madness mingling in their voice. "Oh, you poor, deluded creature, you think we came to surrender?" The human's form shimmered, rippled, and changed. The nondescript uniform melted away, replaced by a form-fitting suit of matte black armor. The dull, defeated eyes blazed with fierce, triumphant light. "We came to conquer," the infiltrator said, grinning a wolf's grin. "And now, Empress, now, you and your precious Imperium will reap the whirlwind." With a thought, the infiltrator activated the dormant virus that had been injected into the Imperium's central command network. In an instant, it spread like wildfire, worming its way into every ship, every system, every neural link of the Thantrian war machine. Chaos erupted, alarms blared, consoles sparked and sputtered, and the proud Thantrian fleet hung dead in space, crippled by the insidious code that now ran rampant through their systems. The invincible became the vulnerable, the conquerors became the conquered. And on the bridge of the Magellan, Captain Nadia Ivanova watched it all unfold with grim satisfaction. The Trojan horse had been delivered, the fatal blow struck. The Imperium, in their hubris, had sown the seeds of their own destruction. "All ships, engage," she said softly, her eyes never leaving the view screen. "Let's finish this." And with a roar of engines and a blaze of weapons fire, the human fleet tore into the helpless Thantrians, exacting a terrible vengeance for centuries of oppression and cruelty. It was a rout, a slaughter, and a reckoning long overdue. In her audience chamber, The eternal Empress could only watch in numb horror as her empire crumbled around her. The human infiltrators stood before her, a mocking smile on their lips, as the last vestiges of Thantrian power were systematically obliterated. "How?" the Empress whispered, her voice raw with disbelief. "How could this happen? We are the Imperium, the rulers of the galaxy. We are invincible." The infiltrators shook their head, almost pityingly. "That was your mistake," they said softly. "You thought you were invincible. You never dreamed that a primitive race could outthink you, outmaneuver you, and bring you to your knees." They leaned in close, their breath hot on the Empress's cheek. "But that's the thing about humans, Your Majesty. We're full of surprises, and when we set our minds to something, when we have something to fight for, something to believe in, there's nothing in this universe that can stop us." With that, the infiltrator turned and strode from the chamber, leaving the Empress to the ruin of her empire and the bitter ashes of her pride. The galaxy had changed forever. The old order swept away in a tide of human defiance and ingenuity. A new age had begun, an age where the name of Ivanova, and the indomitable spirit she embodied, would be spoken with reverence and awe for generations to come. Humanity had taken its first steps onto the galactic stage, and nothing would ever be the same. An unexpected ally. In the aftermath of the Thantrian Imperium's stunning defeat, the galaxy was in turmoil. The sudden power vacuum left by the collapse of the ancient regime had thrown the established order into chaos, with dozens of races and factions scrambling to fill the void. For the crew of the Magellan, it was a time of both triumph and trepidation. They had struck a blow for freedom and self-determination, had shattered the myth of Thantrian invincibility. But the road ahead was fraught with uncertainty. The Imperium, even in its death throes, was still a formidable foe, and there were many among the subjugated races who viewed humanity with fear and suspicion. An unexpected ally, Ivanova, ever the pragmatist, was initially skeptical. The Oryx were an unknown quantity, and their story, while compelling, was almost too good to be true. A secret resistance, advanced technology, a chance to turn the tide of the war. It seemed like something out of a Hollywood adventure, not the grim reality of galactic conflict. But as she spoke with the Oryx leaders, heard the passion and conviction in their voices, saw the fire that burned in their eyes, she began to believe. These were no mere refugees, no ragtag band of survivors. They were warriors, scientists, visionaries, individuals of immense courage and capability, forged in the crucible of Thantrian oppression. And the technology they offered was no mere trinket or bauble. It was the key to everything. A way to level the playing field, to match and even exceed the Imperium's vaunted might. With Oryx knowledge and human resourcefulness, they could build a fleet that would be the envy of the galaxy, a force for liberation and justice that no tyrant could withstand. The Oryx had a plan, daring and audacious in its scope. They would strike at the heart of the Imperium itself, at the shipyards and factories that churned out its instruments of war. They would cripple its ability to make war, even as Ivanova and her allies pressed the attack on a dozen fronts. It was a gamble, a roll of the dice on a galactic scale. But Ivanova had never been one to shy away from a challenge, and the stakes could not be higher. The future of the galaxy, the fate of countless billions, hung in the balance. And so, in a moment that would echo through the ages, Captain Nadia Ivanova clasped hands with the Oryx leader, a solemn vow passing between them. Two peoples, once separated by the gulf of space and culture, now united in common cause. Together, they would face the gathering storm, would stare down the massed might of the Imperium, and would not blink. The preparation were intense, feverish. Human ingenuity melded with Oryx sophistication as a new breed of warship took form in secret shipyards across the galaxy. Soldiers trained, tactics were honed, and a sense of electric anticipation built as the hour of reckoning drew near. And then, on a day that would forever mark the turning point in the war, the trap was sprung. Oryx infiltrators, long planted in the heart of Thanatrian space, struck with surgical precision, sabotaging key facilities and sowing chaos in the enemy's ranks. At the same time, Ivanova led the charge, a combined human/Oryx fleet that smashed through Thanatrian lines like a thunderbolt. The battles were titanic, the casualties staggering. But with every engagement, every hard-fought victory, the Imperium's grip weakened. Its fleets were in disarray, its supply lines crumbling, its once unassailable confidence shattered. The aura of invincibility that had cloaked the Thanatrian war machine for millennia was gone, and in its place was a growing sense of dread, a realization that the unthinkable was coming to pass. They were losing. The Imperium, the mightiest power the galaxy had ever known, was losing. It was a slow, grinding process, marked by desperate clashes and last-ditch stands. The Thanatrians fought with the fury of the doomed, knowing that every defeat brought them closer to the abyss. But Ivanova and her allies were relentless, implacable, driven by a righteous fury that would not be denied. And in the end, on a blasted, war-torn world that had once been a Thanatrian stronghold, it was over. The last Imperium warlord lay dead at Ivanova's feet, his armies scattered and his dreams of conquest shattered. The galaxy, for the first time in living memory, was free. There was celebration, of course, and mourning for the fallen. But even in the giddy aftermath of victory, Ivanova knew that their work was not done. The Imperium was broken, but its legacy remained. A galaxy ravaged by centuries of oppression, its peoples traumatized and divided. Healing those wounds, building a lasting peace, that would be the work of generations. But as she stood on the bridge of her ship, watching the stars wheel overhead, Nadia Ivanova felt a sense of profound hope, of possibility. They had done the impossible. They had taken on a power that bestrode the galaxy like a colossus, and they had won. And in doing so, they had lit a beacon, a shining light that would guide the way forward, not just for humanity, but for all the peoples of the galaxy. It was a new dawn, a new era. And as Captain Ivanova set course for home, she knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever trials and tribulations the future might bring, they would face them as they always had, together, united, unbroken and unafraid. It was a new dawn, a new era. And as Captain Ivanova set course for home, she knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever trials and tribulations the future might bring, they would face them as they always had, together, united, unbroken and unafraid. For they were human, the children of Earth. They had looked into the abyss, had stared down the mightiest empire the universe had ever known, and had emerged victorious. And now, with the wind of change at their backs and the fire of determination burning bright in their hearts, there was nothing that could stand in their way. The end.